in this one, I think there's a lot of confusion about this one, and that is, what does it mean to be the head of the household? What does it mean really in terms of how you execute your responsibilities as the head of the household? What's the biblical definition of the head of the household, if you will?
Well, I can just kind of walk you through my experience of coming to a realization of what that meant. I had been married Luana and I had been married for about 4 years, and we're about to celebrate, we've been married 34 years, it's going to be 35 years. I read where Paul was saying that wives submit to your husbands, again in Ephesians. He said, but men, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. Now, let me go down, let me kind of peel some of the layers back, because we may talk, if we get time, we'll maybe talk about this from a different aspect. But I thought, well, what man's not, a man who will not lay down his life for his wife is not worth his salt. I mean, I would protect my wife, I would protect my children, I would easily give my life to protect them. That's not a question. That's not what he's talking about. He's not talking about laying down the physical life. He's talking about giving up our wants, our ambitions, the ideas that these false ideas.
Talking about sacrifice.
Absolutely. Just like Jesus left heaven to come to this earth and take on flesh, lived a sinless life, and gave all that up, and then laid down his life for the church, for you and me, so that we might have a relationship with our Creator. What I believe that is saying, and what it means to be the head of the house, is that we're willing to give up what we want in order for our wives and children to be who God has created them to be. Now, that doesn't mean we don't lead. We lead, but we lead in a servant leadership manner. And the submission part that Paul writes about becomes very easy when we love our wives in that manner and we love our children. They will follow a leader like that.
Yeah, and keep in mind that when you stop and ponder how you love your children, there's really no price you wouldn't pay for them. At least I hope so. If you're the man God's called you to be, there's no price you wouldn't pay for your children. You have to have the same attitude towards your wife. You have to be willing to give your life in a physical sense, but more importantly, in just what Tony was talking about, in terms of sacrificially giving your life, giving up the pleasures of this life, if that's what it takes for you to protect her, to provide for her, to be the leader in the home. And if you do those things that we've talked about, or we'll talk about in this conference here, those 5 things, then you are being the head of the household, if you're executing those the way God has called you to do. So I know it's a question that the feminist movement just goes berserk when you talk about this. But if you're doing what Tony just explained, if you're making that sacrifice for your wife and your family, and when you think in terms of needs, you think of their needs first. And they know that you're willing to pay whatever price there is for their safety, for their provision, for their security. You will be the head of the household.
And another part of that revelation for me is in Proverbs. It talks about a wife is a gift of the Lord. And I think we need to see that the Lord, I believe, the Lord, as we seek Him, you know, I was praying for my wife when I was actually, I remember I was a Lance Corporal at Camp Pendleton. I remember sitting up on top of one of the mountains just praying for a woman that God would bring my way. Didn't know who
before
it was going to be.
Before you were married.
Oh, long before I even met her. Praying for her. I have to believe God answered that prayer.
Yeah.
And He gave me a gift, and I need to love that gift and not, you know, when you get a gift, you don't say, well, wait a minute, I don't like that, I don't like this. We need to learn to be grateful for what God has given us in our wives and help them be all that God has intended for them to be.
And just for the record, God gave you a whole lot more than you were entitled to or that you deserved.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That
But I
will
could
not
probably
argue
say
with.
the same thing about myself.
I will not argue with you on that one.